Harms Army. Uh, this episode, it's not really an episode. It's an addendum. It's a footnote to the footnote. There were a couple things I wanted to talk about in the previous episode. Religion. Which was indeed a footnote to the previous episode, the episode before that, which was on Islam. So then I talked about religion, made a few points mostly about my personal orientation and my personal thoughts on the matter. But I wanted to say a couple things in addition to what I said in the previous episode. Because I got to thinking, I should have said a few more things than just focusing on my personal thoughts on the matter of religion. And that is principally religion gets blamed for a lot of the misery in the world, and it gets blamed for a lot of the stupidity in the world. And I'd like to speak to that just for a couple of minutes. I already mentioned in the previous episode that, the hard atheists, like the apocalyptic horsemen, the four apocalyptic horsemen, are just, how the atheists, and maybe not in general, but a number of atheists I've come across are very impressed with themselves for being men of science, being rational, and so on and so forth. They're very impressed with themselves. I've come across this a few times. And I think that is a next door neighbor to this issue of blaming religion for all the wars. I've heard that, which is very strange. I'm thinking, I've written on this subject in a short book called "It's Not About Religion," but I focus mostly on the Middle East, on the contemporary issues in the Middle East, and how the instability that we see in the Middle East is not due to religion, which it's not. A lot of people like to chalk it up to religion. It's not. There are no inherent tensions, or there isn't an inherent adversarial relationship between Jews and Muslims. There just happens to be in the Palestine-Israel conflict. There happens to be. It's got nothing to do with Judaism. It's got nothing to do with Islam. It's got everything to do with the nature of that conflict, with Zionism and the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. That's the issue, not anything, theological. Likewise, we could pick Jesus. There's so many examples. The issue of Northern Ireland, right? The Troubles and so on, and Northern Ireland. Is that a theological issue? Is there an inherent adversarial tension between Protestants and Catholics? No. Were both sides, people loyal to England and people who wanted an independent and free Northern Ireland, were they debating the finer points at the Council of Trent? No, they were not. Kashmir. Pick any conflict you want. I don't see religion on the face of it. Yeah, sure. In Northern Ireland, you had Catholics and pitted against Protestants. Okay, sure. In the Palestine-Israel conflict, you got Muslims and you got Jews. Okay, so that stuff is in the frame. You can see it. But it's not the cause of those conflicts. They just happen to belong to two different, religious groups. But it's got zip to do with the conflict. Likewise with wars. I don't know, pick any, what war was started by religion? Which one? The Crusades? Were the Crusades religious? When the crowds yelled Deus Vult, and Pope Urban II, basically dispatched the Crusaders into Jerusalem to reclaim Jerusalem from those terrible Muslims, those Arab Muslims. Was that a religious act? No. That's power politics on display with the patina, a superficial consideration of religion. So there's the Crusades. That's that gets cited as an example, it wasn't a religious conflict. There were even the wars of religion. These are all power politic conflicts. Issues of power politics. They have nothing to do with religion. I shouldn't say nothing, but I mean, religion's barely in the picture, So I would ask, which wars were started by religion? Which wars, what theological disputes led to bloodshed, led to ongoing political conflict, like in Northern Ireland or Palestine, or Kashmir, or whatever example you want to pick? Which ones? There's nothing inherently violent about religion. You can use religion to be violent, absolutely. If you want to, justify the savagery you're committing, if you want to justify it on scriptural or religious grounds, sure, you can do that. There's nobody stopping you. Many have done it, and many more will do it. I don't think that makes it religious. When a suicide bomber blows him or herself up in West Jerusalem, they yell Allahu Akbar. God is great. So is that a religious act? Blowing the contents of a pizzeria into the street in West Jerusalem? Blowing up a public bus? Blowing up a theater? Is that a religious act because the perpetrator yelled Allahu Akbar? God is great? No. Arabs invoke the name of God all day, every day. And that suicide bomber grew up in that culture, and that's just it's kind of what you do. There's one example I think it's really interesting. I had to get used to this as my time spent in the Middle East. Let's say you and I are going to meet for lunch tomorrow. Yeah? Okay. So maybe we're socializing today. We're on the phone or whatever. And then I'll see you tomorrow for lunch. Okay, we're going to meet at wherever. I say, okay, see you tomorrow, as we say goodbye. The Arab response is, Inshallah. Which takes a minute to get used to. Because it's kind of unsettling. At least it was to me. Inshallah. It means God willing. That means if God wills it, we'll meet for lunch tomorrow. I found myself saying it eventually. I started saying inshallah. You just get used to it, But it's like, in the Arab mind, if we don't die between now and then we will meet for lunch. If God wills it, inshallah. So this is just one tiny example of Arabs invoking the name of God. They do it all day long. They do it, when you bump into someone at the vegetable market, you're like, oh, hi, you bump into someone you bump into a relative, whatever. You invoke the name of God. You do it all day long. So, of course, the suicide bomber is going to invoke the name of God, because he's been doing it since he was 5, or younger. That's just normal. Doesn't make it an act of God. Doesn't make it an act of. It doesn't make it a religious act or a theological act. It's not. So, but yeah, you can be violent and justify, the rough justice, the tribal violence, you read about in human rights reports coming out of Afghanistan or wherever. Just horrendous, brutal treatment of human beings. This is chalked up as Sharia law. I've talked about Sharia law on the program. They want to give it a kind of religious legitimacy. So they're gonna chalk it up to Sharia law. We're gonna make this, we're gonna make this about Islam. Islam doesn't justify that behavior. Islam doesn't justify those executions and that torture. There's nothing Islamic about it. It's tribal. That particular tribal chieftain is a psychotic alpha male, and he's making the decisions. It's got nothing to do with the Quran. It's got nothing to do with the Prophet Muhammad. It's got nothing to do with the Hadith. It's got nothing to do with anything. It just has to do with that particular guy who's a tribal chief, and he says, okay, if these two people get caught, in a moment of romance outside of wedlock, then we're going to bury them waist deep and bludgeon them with rocks until they're dead. What's that got to do with the Hadith? What's that got to do with the Quran? Nothing. Doesn't have anything to do with either one of them. What's that got to do with Islam? Nothing. Did the Prophet Muhammad advocate that behavior? No. The Prophet Muhammad was a reformer. He spent his time trying to improve the lot of women and orphans and and the poor. I mean that was his priority, not burying people waist deep and bludgeoning them with rocks. That's that particular tribal chieftain in Afghanistan. So it's got nothing to do with religion. But they do it. They're like, oh, this is Sharia law. This is consistent with, we're good Muslims. No, you're not. No, you're not. We're good Catholics. We're good Protestants. We're good this. We're good that. We're good Jews. Yeah, in your mind. Yeah, everyone thinks they're good. That's the human, sort of default setting, is that we all think we're wonderful. We all think we're right. We all think we get out of bed in the morning and make the world a better place. We're all wonderful. We must live in a paradise. The mind reels, So chalking all this violence up to religion is it's like a joke. And then the stupidity thing. That's another one I wanna speak to. Religion makes you stupid. No. It doesn't make you stupid. You can be stupid. You can use religion to be stupid. Absolutely, 100%. You can use religion to be stupid. You can read the Bible in a stupid way. You can read Jewish scripture in a stupid way. You can read the Quran in a stupid way. And you can squeeze out of it whatever you want. Whatever you're looking for, you'll find it in those texts. Guaranteed. Whatever you want to find. If you're on a mission to justify whatever, or, just a good old-fashioned be stupid, you can find it in those texts. You can find anything you want in those texts. You can find whatever you want in the complete works of Shakespeare. Whatever you want. You can find whatever you want. That's the fun of being stupid. You can, these things are supple, they're malleable. Religion is like, it's like clay. You can just kind of shape it into whatever you want, and you can convince yourself you're a good Jew or a good Christian or a good Muslim, and you can read the associative or attendant, religious texts like an idiot. Absolutely, nothing's stopping you. That's the fun thing about religion, is you can do whatever you want with it. You can do whatever you want with it, and you can use it to justify whatever you want. Knock yourself out. Who's going to stop you? Something Noam Chomsky said. He says lots of interesting things. One of the many interesting things he said in an interview. He doesn't talk about his personal life much, but this particular interview, the interviewer was asking Chomsky about his youth and growing up and being a kid and stuff like that, his early history. So he's talking about he grew up in a very strict, Orthodox Jewish family upbringing, and strict, Orthodox Jewish law prohibits the use of tobacco. Okay. So one of Chomsky's uncles, like way back a million years ago, he would smoke a pipe after dinner. Okay. So then a very, very young Noam Chomsky, he's probably about 8 years old, he noticed his uncle smoking a pipe, and he says to his dad, he said, "Uncle so-and-so's smoking a pipe, but as Jews we're not supposed to use tobacco." And Chomsky's father said, "Well, your uncle views the pipe of tobacco as part of his meal." And Chomsky said, "It was then and there, at that particular moment, that I realized that religion, organized religion, is based on the assumption that God's an idiot." God, that's true. Some of the worst racists and bigots and chuckleheads I know are in church every Sunday. They think that God's not going to notice what kind of person you are the other 6 days of the week. God's just going to pay attention to you holding the door open for little old ladies at church and, passing the collection basket and stuff. But God's too much of a moron to notice what you're doing the other 6 days of the week? That you're a 90-mile-an-hour bigot? That's astounding. But, I've seen, and so have you, people add footnotes to the 10 Commandments. Like, well, okay, but, we got to allow for this. They do it all the time. They do it all the time. You can bend Scripture, you can bend these writings, these texts, to fit whatever agenda you have. Whatever agenda you have. And for that matter, I think I've talked about this on the show, about morality. And how a lot of people argue that, we get our morality from religion. Probably not. It's probably the other way around. We write our morality onto religion. You custom tailor well, humans were moral 45,000 years ago. That's when the code of conduct entered the human genome. That was 45,000 years ago. The oldest organized scriptural, codified religions that we have, about 3,000 years old. So it's a 42,000 year discrepancy. So we were moral way before we were religious. Can religion fine tune the value systems? Yeah, absolutely it can, and it does fine tune the value systems. But your sense of morality, no, it does not. Your sense of morality is biologically wired into you. It's got nothing to do with religion. But people on an individual level, impose their morality onto religion. We custom tailor our religions to suit our own agenda, our own personal, orientation or what have you. We do that all the time. You got 2 billion Christians in the world. Well, you got 2 billion versions of Christianity. Either that, or you're suggesting, your position is that all Jews are the same. All Muslims are the same. They're all on the same page. If you think all Jews are the same, go to Israel and spend about 5 minutes there, and you'll very quickly see that all Jews are not the same, that they're not on the same page. I think about 5 minutes in Israel would do it. All Muslims are the same? Hasn't been my experience or my observation. All Christians are the same? All Christians are on the same page? That's hilarious. If you live in this culture, and if you live in the United States, then you know that that's ludicrous to suggest that all Christians are on the same page. That there's a monolithic sort of, thing called Christianity. And we, if people are Christian, then they adhere to it. There's a continuity and a consistency because we're subscribing to this monolithic thing called Judaism or Islam or whatever. That's ridiculous. I mean, I can't even, it's too absurd for words to make that assertion. We custom tailor our own religions, and we bend them, and we write our own, Yeah, you can be a bigot, you can be a racist, and I'm a good Christian. Are you? Are you a good Christian? I don't know if that's true. I see the world as it truly is. I see it clearly. And they'll justify, even their bigotry. They'll justify it on Christian grounds, which is hilarious, if not deeply upsetting. Yeah, this is one of those you don't know whether to laugh or cry situations. It's just ridiculous. But they'll do it. Humans custom tailor their religion to fit their needs, to fit their agenda, to fit their prejudices, to fit their whatever orientation, however you want to be oriented. It's your personal spirituality. You can do what you want with it, and people do. There's a lot of there's some philosophers, not a lot, but there's some philosophers that just say, all right, well, just why the charade? If you're gonna bend and twist and customize your religion, then why don't you just stand on your own 2 feet, get rid of religion, and just become the source or the author or the wellspring of your own morality. We talk about existentialism. We did an episode on that. Nietzsche. We should do a whole Nietzsche episode. That'd be fun. This is what they're talking about. Why go to Kant? Why go to Aristotle? Why go to the church for your morality? Why go outside of yourself when you can, just live your morality like an artist? That's what Nietzsche's talking about. Live your morality like an artist. Artists don't go looking for rule books. And if you give an artist a rule book, you probably get it thrown back at you. Right? Yeah. I think that's about it. If I think of anything else, we'll just do another addendum. So thank you for joining me in this addendum to episode 20. I think it was 20. Yeah, episode 20, addendum. How you guys been? You can just write me an email. If there's something you want me to talk about, or you think this would be a good episode, just send me an email. Slide into my DMs. Is that what that means? I don't really know what that means. I shouldn't say that, because maybe it's not. Maybe it's like bad. Slide into your DMs. Is that is that a thing? Like a thing? I gotta look that up. I shouldn't say that. What am I doing? I shouldn't say that. I don't know what that means. It could be bad. It could mean something that I don't mean to say. Just send me an email, okay? Just keep it simple. Send me an email, gharms@gmail.com. It's all over the internet, not hard to find. Or just go to the contact form and fill out a contact thingy on either the Inquiry or GregoryHarms.com and say, hey, you should do an episode on whatever. Okie dokie. I'm not gonna guarantee you I'm gonna do it, but I'll definitely give it all the consideration it deserves. I'll give it all the consideration it deserves. And if it's good, if I like it, I'll be like, yeah, I'll do that. And if it's ludicrous, then probably not. But I will appreciate the input nevertheless. Because that's what we're all about here on the Inquiry. It's all about appreciation. It's all about connecting with the Harms Army. And I do apologize if there are viewers who are like, I don't want to be associated. I didn't join up for this Harms Army nonsense. I'm just going to watch the podcast, but I don't want to. What's this Harms Army BS? So I apologize if I'm addressing the Harms Army, and many of you, a good handful of you anyway, are just like, yeah, not interested. I don't want to be a member of this Harms Army. But I know a number of students who are like fist in the air. Hell yeah, they're hardcore members of the Harms Army. Hardcore members of the Harms Army. Yeah, which is cool. And if you don't want to be in the Harms Army, that's cool too. You do you. And that's what the Inquiry is all about. You doing you. We live and let live here at the Inquiry. Okay. I'll just keep talking. I got a lot to say. See you for episode 21 on the Inquiry, and we're going to have Michael back in the studio. It's going to be a hot time in the old town.